film on top. What else? Is that? Yeah, technically you take a temp on it, so 200 degrees right before it boils, or shortly before it boils. Anything else? Bubbles, alright. Bubbles on the outside edge, and then a little bit of steam maybe. So you don't want a full boil, but you can watch it, or you can take a temp on it, either way. So one thing to remember with crème anglaise is, right now, this is raw egg. So we're going to temper that hot milk into the raw egg, and we'll probably kill off most of what's in there, but we'll then put this back on the heat, and when this comes off again, it's going to go into a clean bowl and not the same one with the raw egg yolks in it, right? See, cross-contamination, you don't want that. So that's something that's a little bit tricky if you're not aware of it, but not super tricky, but you just got to keep aware, which means can I get a bowl of this? Thank you. So this got a little bubble showing up. Tempering, just to slowly heat up your egg mixture. If you need to pause it for a minute, kind of mix it in, that's fine. Or scrape the sides down, I'll give you that. Now this goes back on the heat. You can use the same pan for that. But get it all in there, get it mixed up. So now we're going to cook this to about 170, 175. What we're trying to do is coagulate the egg and thicken it up. Do that again. Now at that point, you're going to switch to a spatula in the pan. Okay? That way you can scrape the sides and the bottom. So as soon as you get egg or any part that's going to thicken up, you can scrape it into the rest of it and kind of mix it up. What you don't want to do is let it sit and forget about it. So it will start to thicken up where it gets hotter on the edge, on the sides of the pan or the bottom. And then if you go back too late, you'll get little floaters, little pockets, and will kind of go away. So it's almost a constant deal. It'll happen fairly quickly though, because remember, we tempered hot liquid into the egg, so that warmed them up. And then back on the heat. So it won't take very long to get that 170 and 175. The more you do this, the easier it'll be to just tell by feel or by look. It won't be super watery, and it'll thicken up, you'll see it get thicker. It'll take a few repetitions doing it, but again, this is a classic sauce, so if you're going to do anything in pastry, you're more likely to make crème anglaise pretty often. So you'll get a couple chances to get it right, but...
Isn't it like just a pudding?
No, it's not quite a pudding. If you had more egg in there, it might be, it'll firm up enough to be a pudding, but it's usually thinner than that. But the same basic ingredients, though. You see that on the spatula? That's the egg starting to thicken up. And I'm trying to mix into the rest of it, so I'm scraping the side of the bowl, pan rather. You know, the bottom of the pan, you see that? That's what I'm scraping into it right there. It's starting to get thick, but I want to keep it off of the pan and into the mixture. Trying to see it's getting thick already, so it's pretty much hit that temp. I'm going to keep it on a little bit longer, double check it. But I don't want to boil it. What happens if I boil this?
Bad things.
What, bad things?
It
Man,
curdles.
what kind of bad things?
It curdles.
Not the eggs. Yeah, it'll curdle. So right now they're cooked right now, it's thickening up, but too much heat, it'll overcoagulate. So overcoagulation is what you want to guard against. Coagulation's good, overcoagulation's bad. That'll, yeah, make it all watery, make it separate, will not be smooth.
You'll get scrambled eggs.
Scrambled egg pudding.
Even worse
Gross.
than that. Scrambled eggs are good if you just coagulate them. If you overcoagulate them, that's when they curdle and you get water everywhere. That's gross, yeah. So that's pretty good right there, nice and thick. So remember, it's really watery initially, now it's kind of thickened up, kind of like, or a little thicker than heavy cream, really.
Up a zoom, down a zoom out. Up a zoom.
But you gotta keep stirring it. Don't walk away from it. So this is the warm base. This gelatin's going into. Delicious. Look at all that. So you may or may not have to put this back on the heat. Hopefully it's hot enough to dissolve all that gelatin, but I might need a little bit of help here. So just a low flame, just to keep it warm a little bit. The gelatin will warm up and kind of start to use our body temperature, so it doesn't take long. Alright, so I don't see any chunks of gelatin floating around. It's all smooth, even color. Nice. Alright. Excuse me, a little vanilla flavoring. Alright. So now I get an ice bath going, just to kind of speed this up a little bit. But if one of you can grab that bowl and whisk, and then there's a first bit of Bavarian heavy cream. It's got BAB on it. It should be on the left there. Maybe we'll whip up and then towards the back of it for you. So, I'm going to cool this down. This is risky. Why is it risky? What's in here? Gelatin. What happens when it gets cold? Okay. So, if you do this, which you certainly can, you don't have to. This would be a good step just to cool it down slightly. It's going to cool down more when the cream goes in after it's whipped. But think about your form. If you've got a chance to thicken up the filling a little bit before you pour it in, you might want to do that. It'll lessen the chances of it leaking through. So here's my form with the cake in it. See that? Get back to this. Oh my god, there it goes. Hold on. So yeah, if you do this, keep stirring it because it will solidify against the edges of the bowl where it's coldest. And you get little lumps in it. So just briefly over the ice bath. So, this has to go in when it's fluid. You cannot make Bavarian cream filling, store it overnight in the fridge, and then take it out the next day and re-whip it and pipe it. It doesn't work that way. Once the gelatin solidifies and the cream's in it, then you gotta go with it. Which means your form's gotta be ready to go too, okay? So have that cake ready to go in the bowl before you even start making the base. All right. Tab fluid. And that. So form's ready to go. Elevate this a bit. So again, make sure your slices are pretty snug. If you have any small gaps, you might tear extra pieces of your cake, you kind of tuck them in here and there. And I got some, they're probably going to leak, but that's another reason why you want to chill this down just a bit. If it's colder and firmer, it's less likely to leak through. If it's warmer and more fluid, it'll find every little place to kind of do that. So, see any gaps, stuff the cake in there. All right. So, I'm going to go with the cream to soft peak. Thanks for getting this out. Remember, cold cream whips easier than warm cream, although warm cream will eventually whip. You want to get it cold so you can have it happen a little faster. And the whisk too, obviously, that helps. So if you ever have to hand whip anything, try to do it over an ice bath. So if you have your whisk in your hand, you got a bowl of cream, get that over an ice bath. The colder you keep it, the faster it'll come up. Do you have a question? No? Anybody else have a question? So, soft peak on that. I'm going to whisk or do a combination of whisk and fold when this comes off at firm heat, or soft heat. Oh my god, I'm kidding now. Yeah, thanks. Soft heat. Because we're going to work it more into the base, we don't want to take it too far on the machine. Anyway, it'll be a combination of folding, basically pulling the base up from the bottom and mixing it with the cream on top, and then whisking as well. So if you're going back and forth with whisking and a spatula. If you do just a whisk, it'll stay in separate layers. You'll see what I'm talking about. The cream will stay on top and the base of the gelatin will stay on the bottom. And then you try to pull it up by folding. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, I'm going to get my tiramisu base going. This has got the initial step of getting yolk and sugar together. And then whisk it together. Yolk and sugar, sugar and yolk. Alright. This is a half batch. If you're wondering why it's such a small amount, it's just a half batch. Half a batch will fill one of these, right there, I'll go to that in a second. It's here right here. Yeah, it's easy to get one batch between two people. I don't need half of that for them. So soft peak on this, I'll get it into the base here and then I'll pour it into this. One thing, trying to hang on to this piece, the square piece in the other corner. Remember that round base came off of the mousse torts later? Save the square piece as a base for this. If you don't have it, that's fine, but it's nice to have this as a base after this filling goes in anyway. Put that on the bottom. So we'll basically trim it and cut it. There'll be a gap over here to kind of fill in, but for the most part, this will fit the bottom of that. So. Try to get this all the same texture without getting specks in it. Alright. So I'll use that for tiramisu as well. This will go in. So cold cream going into a base with gelatin in it. It's going to want to set up. But you don't have to worry too much about it, but just be aware of it. It's going to get a little thicker. That's normal. So I'll start with folding, and then I'll get that whisk in there in between. Because really folding it, if that's all you do. I talked about whisk alone, but if you fold it by it, that's all you do with the spatula. It's going to take forever to work this stuff together, so extra help. And all I do is a slow figure 8 on this stuff. So, looks pretty good so far, right? You see that darker ribbon of yellow in there a little bit? So some of that base is still hanging out on the bottom, even though I did some folding already. So that's why you gotta go back and forth. Make sure it's an even color. And the gelatin doesn't settle out at the bottom. If it settles out in the bottom of this bowl, and you pour it in this form, it's gonna settle out in the bottom of this form too. So when you go to cut it, there'll be a thick layer of gelatin after it's turned over. Thick layer of gelatin at the top, and then whipped foam with egg and cream at the bottom. So make sure you mix it well. Good time to practice folding. Get that Popeye forearm going. Stir. So you got some color differences, so I need a little more mixing. So that looks pretty good there. Always give this a stir right before you use it, as far as pouring it in the mold. Just so you make sure that there's no gelatin hanging out at the bottom that's going to sink to the bottom of this when it goes in. Alright. So now, you want to pick your lowest spot. Usually it's on the side somewhere. Mine's I think right here. And then go about a 1/4 inch below that. What that'll do is give you space to put your base, your cake base on there. So go a little bit below your lowest point, about a 1/4 inch. Now I should probably go a 1/2 inch. I got kind of wonky on my base here. It's a little bit thick in areas, so I could go a 1/2 inch on mine. But anyway, find your lowest point. And again, it's okay to come up the sides, be jagged a little bit. We'll trim that flat before we take it out of the mold. So, and then go right below this point here. Pull this up. As this sits, even that couple of minutes, it'll start to separate out. So don't let it sit very long. Stir it before you use it, and then pour it. Okay. No water. So now I'm going to kind of speed this up and chill this. So if I can move this in a level manner, which you guys should do this too, so it doesn't slosh around, that's better. So just keep the bowl flat and level. Is there any questions on that part?
Goes in the freezer, right?
Huh?
Goes in the freezer, right?
No freezer. Refrigerator. As far as the base goes, you want to firm it up enough so it can hold the weight of this cake. So don't put that on immediately after pouring the base into the mold. You gotta give it maybe, I'd say 10 minutes to be safe. So it can form a little skin and get a little thickened as far as cooling goes. And then take this out, cut it. You probably just round the edges off and kind of fit it in. Again, this part over here, you have to use some of your scraps and kind of piece it together, but it'll work. Once that base is in there, you still got some jagged edges coming up on the outside of that. What I like to do is inside the bowl, say this is a bowl, say this is a pizza cutter, lay it as flat as possible and just kind of wheel it around so that everything is level with the base of cake that's in there. Okay? So by the time you flip it out, it won't buckle anywhere because it should be flat. If the sides are taller or longer than the base, it will buckle when you flip it over. So make sure it's all level on the bottom, side to side. And I'll probably do this later on. It's not really critical that you guys see this, but you'll see this tomorrow. I'll have it turned out. It'll be on the bottom. You guys have any questions on that? Charlotte Rail?
So for when we fill it in, we'll just leave enough space above that lowest line for cooking.
Yep. And again, if you don't have this, that's fine. For some reason, if you lost it or destroyed it, whatever, or ate it, yeah, you might eat it. I don't know. That's fine. It doesn't have to be on there. It makes it easier to handle though with cake base. And normally, any dessert would have a cake base like this anyway, so it's all sealed up, it's compact. So next up, Tiramisu.